psychedelic, your mind gets manifested. You get to see yourself in a different perspective. You get to feel things, you get to experience things about yourself that you may not have allowed yourself to experience before.
This mystical experience isn't just something that feels good, but it's something that has therapeutic power. It can accelerate psychotherapy, it can facilitate healing.
It's going to help people with those conditions have another treatment opportunity that may really could even save their life.
We really cannot expect these medicines to work like magic pills. It is a co-creation of us with the medicine, and we have to put our work in as well.
We have to liberate our minds, and psychedelics can help with that. They're very good tools for humans to understand who they are, where they come from, and where they want to go.
People deserve the autonomy and the liberty to make their own decisions about how to use these medicines safely in their own lives.
Psychedelic medicine can help us reconnect with a sense of the meaning of life and our own effort to be more purposeful in what we are doing here, which is also part of the great mystery that we exist at all, that we're here.
There's very few things that are not part of the culture wars in the United States, and psychedelics are one of them.
Within the next 3 to 5 years, we have this tremendous opportunity to help integrate psychedelics safely and sustainably into society.
What we're doing in the state of Colorado between our cannabis regulatory program and natural medicine with psilocybin, that we're talking about federally controlled substances that does put us in conflict with federal law. But we've been successful at standing up a program and demonstrating that regulation works, and we hope that we can demonstrate just the same as we stand up this new program in these early stages with a lot of work ahead.
It's almost 40 years you founded MAPS.
Yeah.
If the Rick Doblin of the 80s could time travel and come to see how is the psychedelic things today, would he be enthusiastic or disappointed?
Well, I'd be both. When you think about MDMA being criminalized in 1985, how many veterans have committed suicide since then? Hundreds of thousands, more than 200,000. We have evidence from the past already that MDMA can really reduce suicidality. So if I would have seen that it would have taken almost 40 years and we're not there, it's tragic. But on the other hand, I never thought that there would be hundreds of for-profit psychedelic companies, that there would be over $4 billion invested in for-profit psychedelic companies. So in that way, I would have been kind of astonished that we are where we're at. But I think if I would have told it would take 40 years and it still wouldn't be approved, I wouldn't have stopped doing anything, but I would have been shocked.
So it's a multi-generational struggle, right?
Yes, yeah.
I looked around, and this is the kind of things that have been happening in the entire field. The center of the bullseye is FDA approval. The only thing that's there is ketamine. Surrounding that is multiple studies in phase 3. Behind that, phase 2 studies, phase 1 studies, and preclinical work, just to get the sense of the overwhelming number of studies that are underway that are moving forward more than at the height of the 1960s. The Psychedelic Renaissance is alive and well. We've experienced some major setbacks. The most heartbreaking for me was the FDA rejection of MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD.
This year you feel a kind of disappointment after the FDA's decision to reject MDMA-assisted therapy?
Yeah, I'm disappointed, but I think of the tango. It's 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards, and 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. That's progress, And I think those who made the decision were trying to think of a pure pharmacological reaction more than appreciating the importance of the interpersonal set and setting that is integral to the success of these medications, sacramentals is the word we like to use.
I think there is an interest in recognizing that the advisory committee wasn't really making a scientific decision, that they were hearing things that were exaggerated, not true. I think there's a challenge to address the critics and demonstrate to the FDA that the data is valid and that there should be a way to move forward. And if they have to move forward with more data, that it should be in a phase 4 context post-approval, not another phase 3 study. It will be approved eventually. Hopefully within the next 6 months or a year, it'll be yes without another phase 3 study, or if it's another phase 3 study, it'll be 3 or 4 years.
What can you tell about the most cutting-edge research at the Psychedelic Science 2025?
One of the most exciting developments is that very soon we are going to have the top-line readouts of the phase 3 psilocybin for depression trials. How does that phase 3 data looks like going to have a big impact on psychedelic medicine moving forward? The other topic, which I think creates a buzz, and I'm definitely going to be a little bit biased here because it's from our research group at UCSF, but it is trying to apply psilocybin therapy for indications other than depression and anxiety and PTSD when we try to treat Parkinson's disease with psilocybin.
One of the things that was the most intriguing to me that I'm very hopeful about is a project from Brazil. And this is a project that's using DMT for depression. They have taken, in Brazil, from the indigenous use, then moved the ayahuasca into a scientific context, a scientific medical ritual, you could say, and now they've moved it just to the DMT in vape pens or shorter. So it's this evolution that I think is respectful of the indigenous use, and the results are as good as ayahuasca. So that's been tremendously exciting for me. Ketamine combined with therapy. There's a group that does ketamine-assisted couples therapy. Ketamine's been approved without therapy. And it's suboptimal, and the results fade, but you got to buy more ketamine. But more and more people are understanding, if they're about the patients, that it's better to combine ketamine with therapy. The other part that is really exciting, you might be surprised to hear me say it, but it's non-psychedelic psychedelics. For sort of traumatic brain injury, for neuroplasticity, for cluster headaches, for example. You don't need the psychedelic component necessarily. That's what has been demonstrated with bromo-LSD, non-psychedelic version of LSD, and it still helps.
The most important study with the most important political and spiritual implications was being done by Roland, Tony Bossis, and others, and this was the religious leaders study, with people from different religions receiving psilocybin and trying to see what that did for their spiritual understanding, and trying to see, might there be some common ground from which all of these religions spring.
Both of you participated in the same psychedelic study conducted by Johns Hopkins University. I know it's very difficult to speak about mystical experiences or psychedelic experiences, but how would you describe what you experienced?
Both my experiences were extremely profound, and each had its own theme. So my first experience, the theme was love, and that we as sentient beings, or humans, but also other types of existence, we need to learn to communicate more with our hearts rather than with our heads. My second experience, the theme for which was the womb, that the womb is the center of all creation. Being somebody who believes that God created everything that exists, that God therefore is womb, and then womb on earth, whether it's in humans or animals or plant in different forms, that we should have such an incredible sense of reverence for the womb that in my experience, I saw two women who mean a lot to me, who have had children, and I just fell at their feet in complete and utter awe and gratitude for what they have done for the human race.
The first session was, I think it was a fairly classical Kundalini awakening. It was explosive in its energy and this current moving through my body. I began to think of the Holy Spirit and God even as an energetic force and field that's always present and always moving. So that was the first experience, and it was so important for me to get out of my head and into my body. A month later, I'm back there at Hopkins. My experience was more of my body being in these positions. Like at one point I was rocking like this. And I thought about how Jewish people pray, man, and often Orthodox in their rock like this. And then I found myself flat on my stomach on the sofa with my head on the cushion, and I thought about how Muslims pray off with their head on the ground. So I just had this experience of body prayer that we often don't have in Christianity, that I think Jewish and Muslim people have a much better sense of. I began to develop a much more body-centered theology that was less about what I could figure out in my head and more about how I was experiencing God in my body.
Once you've seen, you cannot unsee. And there's an intuitive kind of feeling at home in the universe that stays with you for a lifetime. If you don't like the word spiritual, call it awesome, or choose a word you're comfortable with. But there is a dimension of experience within our minds. And it's there for good agnostics and atheists, as well as true believers in whatever religious tradition, that simply happens. There's something within the human mind that's supremely wise and beautiful and ultimately loving. And people are discovering it all over the place.
Look at this. This is the results from our second phase 3 study. The people that had therapy with no MDMA, 47.6% no longer had PTSD at the 2-month follow-up. When you add MDMA, it's much better. But I do have a concern, and this concern is that the psychedelic pharma companies are now moving mostly to separate the drug from the therapy. And I think that's really something to be worried about. But people and patients are moving towards therapy. There's been a trend to decrease in medication-only treatment and increase in the use of psychotherapy.
You're a principal investigator in the MDMA study. What have you learned from that study?
What we found actually, for me, was very profound. What we saw is that even people with long-standing horrendous trauma got a deep sense of self-compassion and a deep sense of self-protection and a deep sense of feeling what they went through, not blaming themselves anymore. The shame tended to disappear, and people were able to regulate their emotions much better.
The main theme of this conference is integration. Why is it so important to integrate these experiences?
Well, it's important to really feel what you feel and to be able to spend some time on that and to really pay attention to your internal processes and get to know yourself better. Many people have memories come up of things that they had suppressed or that had been pushed away, and being able to say, this is what happened to me and it happened to me then, and to put it in perspective and to really take your time to integrate it into your larger perspective is terribly important.
What are the risks, if there is any risks?
The risks? The risk is to be left alone in very dark places. And if you have some of these old feelings coming back of having been raped as a child, something like that, which are experiences that people have, it's very important to have people be with you who can hold you, who can comfort you, who can be there for you in a compassionate way. It's a very important part of it. Yeah.
How can we train therapists who can engage in psychedelics?
Well, the first thing is you have to take it yourself. If you haven't taken psychedelics, you don't know what it does. And the most striking thing about psychedelics is you never know what your mind will reveal to you.
So psychedelics cannot cure cancer, but how can psychedelics help people with serious illnesses?
One of the early takeaways of research that was done by Eric Kast in Chicago, where he had just administered LSD as a drug only with no support, was that many of those people found that they reported less pain, needed less pain medicine, less anxiolytic medicine, were more at peace, and some even reported that they no longer feared death. And that's pretty extraordinary. It's wonderful for me to see that, and also as a clinical psychologist to know that I now have ways I can be helpful to people in an incredibly profound way. It will happen within them, but I can help create a context, and we can offer these medicines, and that will be safe, and there's a greater probability that person will live their lives much more deeply, much more appreciatively. Right now, the medicine we can use is ketamine. Ketamine is an atypical psychedelic that has dissociative effects, but if it's used incisively, it absolutely can occasion mystical type experience for people that's very meaningful and lasting. And soon enough, a couple of years, we'll likely be able to use MDMA, 5-methoxy-DMT, LSD, psilocybin.
If you'd like to translate all this to like how psychedelics can facilitate this meaning-giving process, how would you explain that?
The self disintegrates, falls away. The whole story that the person was so attached to, they thought that was all they were, that falls away, that's gone. The physical body, they're disconnected, they're here, but at the same time, they're in some other galaxy, wondering how they'll ever find their way home. With those experiences, then when one returns to, in a few hours, okay, I'm back. And then, wow, all those thoughts in my mind, they're just thoughts. And how utterly vast the universe is, and how am I being in terms of authenticity to myself, integrity, and with others, a sense of connection, a sense of what needs to change, what a person needs to take responsibility for in their lives very clearly. And so, of course, one is more compassionate not only towards oneself, but to others. It makes very clear sense.
Is it the substance itself that has these healing properties, or is it only facilitating an experience that has the healing property? What do you think?
I'm leaning more to its experience, but I'm not surprised if there's also something biological that is also important. But obviously the biological creates the experience and they're related, right? Not easy to separate them really. But a lot of my research has showed that the experience is what mediates the clinical outcomes. So I have research that shows that what's called peak experience or mystical experience mediates the outcome, or emotional breakthroughs, or insight, or the collective experience of communitas, of togetherness in ceremonies. All of these relate to the long-term outcomes. Obviously with the right integration, all these kind of like how you process those experiences, but the experiences are essential, I believe.
So far we mostly spoke about individual experiences, but you also study psychedelics as collective experiences. What kind of studies did you done in this field?
I moved out of the lab a few years ago to study retreats and ceremonies and rituals, studying the experience of communitas. Communitas is this shared collective moment of like joy and togetherness and solidarity. It can happen also spontaneously in festivals or political revolutions out there in the street, and you have hope that suddenly things will change, or natural disasters and suddenly the normal social structure collapses for a moment and everybody feel this solidarity. We're suddenly all together or all in the same boat, there's magic in the air, everybody feel equal, identities don't matter. And a lot of times psychedelics in groups create such experience, and we showed how that also relates to long-term changes in well-being. So these are all the layers that psychedelics can help in creating communities. Kind of from this framework, we identify the issue of mental health as a socio-political one that relates not to some biological imbalances, but to a sense of alienation, loneliness, dislocation, oppression. It's the social glue that crumbles in currently in our world, also give rise to a mental health epidemic in depression, addiction, anxieties, traumas. All of these are relational wounds. And I believe that a lot of the healing should be relational healing. And with psychedelics, they enhance some quality in relations that can help in healing those wounds and creating new forms of communities.
But one of the most important things is how do we scale? How do we reduce the cost? How do we provide more access? And so MAPS Israel is doing the only study in the world now that is directly comparing individual therapy versus group therapy.
Do you think that group therapy could solve the problem of the high price of psychedelic assisted therapy?
No, I think group therapy has a potential of, dramatically lowering the cost. You may not expect this answer, but what we need is legalization. We need legal access for everybody under certain conditions, what they happen to be. You know, a license you get, like a driver's license. We need legalization and state-level reform as a sort of counter to the pharma industry. As long as you've got pharma companies that are separating drug from therapy and are thinking about making money on the drug as much as they can, group therapy will only have marginal effects on making it more widely acceptable. However, let's say in Ukraine, because of the scale of the need, it could say we're going to start up manufacturing inside Ukraine. And we're going to try to produce it at low price, and we're going to make it available to our millions and millions and millions of traumatized people. In that kind of a situation, group therapy could make all the difference.
Another new development that I think is really remarkable is state-level reform. Looking around now, Oregon has treated over 10,000 clients in 2.5 years. And if you look at the last 25 years of all of the psilocybin research in all the world, Oregon has treated way more people than in all the clinical studies. Colorado here is following, and the natural medicine program has just begun. And it's beginning with psilocybin, and it looks like there's a good chance it will move to ibogaine as well. This is a tremendous development in New Mexico. They passed the Psilocybin Act. I was just in Prague. It was a conference on treating war trauma with psychedelics. And what I learned is that the Czech Chamber of Deputies, like the House of Representatives, has passed the Medical Psilocybin Act for the entire country. There's a lot of compassionate access programs that are also beginning in different countries.
Can you tell us the story of how and why Colorado decided to regulate psilocybin?
It all began with a voter measure. And similar to our state's cannabis program, we had voters engage in a ballot initiative process and vote to establish and direct that agencies stand up a regulatory program for access to natural medicine, including a focus on psilocybin at first, as well as a decriminalization or allowances for personal use and sharing of natural medicine. So, and that specifically includes psilocybin and psilocin, DMT, so dimethyltryptamine, ibogaine, and mescaline, excluding peyote. We just licensed the full sets of supply chain license categories, and we're now seeing services be provided.
We're an applicant for a microhealing center license. Hope to get it in the coming weeks.
We have the magical container here after they go through the preparation to be able to have the journey. And the focus is on not us as facilitators being guides, but us facilitating the participant to deeply trust their inner healer and being guided by the medicine itself, by the psilocybin itself. And so we will offer one-on-one integration with the facilitator, but we will also offer 6 months for any participant to continue in integration circles. We will have one dosing per day. We will use the space for 8 hours, however long is needed, but it could be one person up to 8 participants per day. And I know that I have my own participants that have been waiting for months, if not years, for this to come online.
A partner agency, the Department of Regulatory Agencies, is responsible for licensing and regulating those facilitators, those individuals who need to meet certain requirements, training requirements included, in order to be authorized to provide, administer natural medicine and supervise that experience. Also, we're overseeing the cultivation of natural medicine, manufacturing. We also oversee and license testing laboratories because there's required testing that we need to establish.
A lot of people think that there will be a retail market, and there's not. There's the personal use, you can share or gift, which you cannot sell.
Got it, okay.
And then you can only buy it from the licensed handler under the healing center license.
There have been, we know of at least 2 healing centers that have had ceremonies with participants already, and we need to show that we can do it. So again, that in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's loosened up everywhere.
Senator, can you explain us how this new medical psilocybin act, which was just adopted by the legislature in New Mexico, will improve the health and well-being of the citizens of your state?
Psilocybin is another option for people who need help with serious behavioral health conditions. Now the data is telling us it could possibly be helpful for lots of conditions. But, in our law, we build 4 medical conditions into the law. Post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of veterans, first responders, people with major depressive disorder, often treatment-resistant depression where maybe pharmaceutical drugs haven't worked, don't work, huge side effects there. Substance abuse disorder, and then the 4th condition is end-of-life anxiety and kind of palliative care. I'm a Democrat, but I sought out Republican colleagues to partner with me on this. Very conservative, not known as maybe the most conservative. But in one case, Senator was a veteran. And I just said, how do you feel about this? And are you aware of this? And he was. And he said, sure, let's do it. And we went forth together.
One big issue with psilocybin treatment is the high price. How can you make sure that less advantaged people can have access to treatment?
We created what we call a psilocybin equity fund. We, as a state, will put funds into this pot of money so the state can fund treatment for people who can't afford it. And that's how we make it equitable.
There's a plethora now beginning of psychotherapy training programs that bring the specialized knowledge that have come from these decades of research. We hope one day this training becomes standard for people that want to become psychiatrists and psychotherapists.
So Jeremy, can you tell us what Saba is about?
What we're creating is a training and education ecosystem for psychedelic-assisted therapies with a partnership of leading universities, organizations, and experts around the critical need for training and educating not just therapists, but all the other critical roles in the healthcare system. And last week we announced, in partnership with what's called the University Psychedelic Education Program, or UPEP. And this is a consortium of now 32 universities across 22 states in the United States that are integrating psychedelic education into their degree programs, starting with social work and nursing degree programs. We'll be expanding next to medical schools, psychiatry programs, public health.
I want my medicine, peyote, to be there as it is for a long time for my children, for my grandchildren.
The plants, the medicines you're going to be talking about have spirits, just like you and I have a spirit. Please understand that each of these medicines has a different way of living and thriving in their own environment. When you take them out of their home and don't care for them properly, you destroy the power that the Creator gave them to help us in good ways.
As I've gone deeper into my medicine path and work, I had the honor and privilege of initiating in Gabon into Mabanji, which is a part of Iboga traditions. And that really helped me solidify this, knowing that honoring our ancestors is an important part of how we reclaim our power. The beautiful thing of working with these medicines is that they really help us to unpack a lot of trauma, to really become aware of how it's impacting us still, thinking about the ways in which the experiences and the characteristics and the trauma of our ancestors lives on in our bodies. Our bodies keep the score beyond just this lifetime, but for many lifetimes. And working with these medicines helps us to unpack a lot of that and to reclaim our own place in our lineage.
You speak about decolonization. How can we track back the heritage of colonization in this field in psychedelic medicine?
Unfortunately, much of this resurgence is built on extraction, right? The extraction of culture and material. I do believe that there are really healthy ways that we can engage in cultural exchange of information and medicine and healing modalities. But what I see happening a lot in this space is a replication of the practices and the system of colonization, of going to other people's lands to take from them, to overconsume these medicines without the reverence that it really requires to be in a relationship with the plants and the land that they come from. But I do find it really supportive for people to become more aware of what that process of colonization was through history, how we've arrived to this moment, and how we can each take responsibility for not replicating those characteristics of colonization and oppression within ourselves.
In your book, Tripped Nazi Germany and the CIA, you trace the kind of hidden lineage between the early Nazi research and the CIA studies on LSD. Can you talk more about this link between the two?
Well, the Nazis, the SS, did psychedelic experiments in the concentration camp of Dachau, and there was a connection between the CEO of Sandoz, the company that developed LSD, and Richard Kuhn, who was a leading Nazi biochemist. And Kuhn received half a gram of ergotamine in October 1943 from Switzerland. Nazis were looking for a truth drug, which they could use in interrogations to extract secrets from people. So the Americans were very interested in that and then conducted their own truth drug experiments with LSD. First the US military and then the CIA. And then the CIA actually pressured also Sandoz not to distribute LSD to the Eastern Bloc. So LSD, because of its Nazi past, did not have the chance to become like a global health medicine.
So what happened exactly in the concentration camps? Do you know about the details of what kind of experiments the Nazis did with these drugs?
I saw 2 pages of a conclusion of the tests, and I read also one trip report of an inmate who received a psychedelic in Dachau, and he had an amazing trip. Like, he really liked it, which surprised me in the beginning because I thought it must be horrible to have a psychedelic experience in the concentration camp. But he was so happy to experience something else, at least for a couple of hours. And he told the SS supervisor, how great it was. So SS was a bit disappointed because they didn't want to, give inmates a good time. They wanted to destabilize people.
What do you think? And that's just speculation. What would have happened if Hitler would use LSD? Would it change him for the bad or good way?
Well, LSD does not really make you a good person, I would say. It's not a moral drug. There is a chance that you have different ideas and maybe overcome orthodox belief systems, but there's also the chance with LSD that your fixed ideology or your fixed belief system is enhanced. So there's no guarantee that Hitler would have become a peacenik and stopped the war and saved all the Jews. I don't think it would have happened.
Can you explain to people who are not educated about psychedelics, what's the difference from taking mushrooms at a rave and using psilocybin for healing?
I am a very big proponent of the idea that recreational or community or naturalistic use is healing and is therapeutic, and that sense of just celebrating being alive with other human beings and feeling like you're part of a tribe and you can really enjoy music and aesthetic experiences and all of these things. And I find that to be incredibly healing. And it was where I found my queer identity and found queer community.
How can the LGBTQ community benefit from psychedelics?
In addition to some of the ways that we see the general population benefiting in terms of mental health, like depression, anxiety, trauma symptoms, I think that there's something really unique about the types of issues that queer and trans people struggle with, like internalized transphobia, internalized homophobia, shame, body dysphoria, and ways that people can benefit just from increased self-acceptance, feeling that sense of like, my humanness transcends all of my identities and I get to show up exactly the way that I am and express myself exactly the way that feels authentic to me. In psychedelic experiences, it can almost be like a spiritual validation of your humanity and your perfection, however that shows up. And I think that's just so profound for communities that are marginalized and constantly told that they're wrong or bad for being who they are.
The transcendental world within us is unspeakably vast, beautiful, awesome, and hard to put into language. Art, music, dance, poetry probably expresses it better than our scientific articles, but we still write our scientific articles and play with our statistics and do the best we can. But this is really at the frontiers of science. This is where science is encountering the sacred.